All right, let's get started. Thank you all for joining. Welcome to Water Week. I guess it's official. Here we are, kicking things off for Water Week 2020 with this webinar. Very excited to have all of you. As I mentioned before, we had close to 2,000 people registered. We're already at around 1,100 attendees who have signed in, so we're super excited to have you all. I'm Adam Krantz, CEO of NACWA. Obviously, we wish we would all be able to meet in person here in Washington, D.C., but this virtual format will have to do. And in fact, it's very exciting that so many folks have registered for this. Bottom line is, if every one of you could actually reach out to your senators, your members of the House of Representatives, that would be thousands and thousands of phone calls on behalf of the water sector. And would make a huge and enormous impact as we seek to face the impacts of this terrible pandemic, but also remind folks about how critical the water sector is now in a way perhaps we've never been seen as quite as so critical before. So we greatly appreciate everyone joining virtually today. We obviously cannot thank all of you for everything that you're doing in person here. But we want to thank you for leveraging the importance of water and all the work of the water sector during this challenging time. Whether you're a utility, a corporate entity, an association, etc., all of you who are on this call play a pivotal and critical role in voicing the priorities of the water sector. First and foremost, I do want to thank all of the great organizations, their CEOs and their staffs that are participating this year as our Water Week partners. They've continued to support the event in this virtual format, and believe me when I tell you it's a lot of work to transition from an in-person event to the virtual format. So thanks to all of the NACWA staff and all of these Water Week partner staff for the hard work that they've done in making this happen. Their logos are going to be listed on this next slide that will be coming up, but I also want to acknowledge all of them individually. The Association of Clean Water Administrators, the American Membrane Technology Association, the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies, the American Public Works Association, the American Society of Civil Engineers, the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators, the American Water Works Association, the Council of Infrastructure Financing Authorities, the Clean Water Construction Coalition, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, the U.S. Water Alliance, the Water and Wastewater Equipment Manufacturers Association, Water Reuse, the Water Environment Federation, and the Water Research Foundation. We also have many state and regional groups supporting this effort as well, but they are too numerous to name, and if I forgot anybody, I apologize in advance, but know how much we value your support. On behalf of all the Water Week partners, we hope that for you, everyone tuning into this webinar, that you, your family, your friends, your loved ones, all of your staff and colleagues are staying safe and healthy during this trying time. I know we all look forward to being in person in DC for next year's Water Week. And thanks in large part to the incredible work of the water sector and the essential personnel at our nation's utilities across the country. I know that we will persevere through this and we will all be together next year under better circumstances. I would also like to thank all of our sponsors this year for their generous support. This includes Best and Krieger, Earth and Water Law, HDR, and there will be a slide on this coming up. HDR, Marcus Faust, McWayne, the Signal Group, the Water Finance and Management magazine, and Xylem as well. Thank you again for your sponsorship, your loyalty, even during these circumstances, to ensure that we can continue to produce this type of webinar and all of the material we need to stay on message during Water Week. Water Week continues to grow each year as the water sector continues to unify and increase its collaboration to elevate our message about the importance of water, including drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and water reuse to members of Congress and to key federal, state, and local officials across the country. Our message is even more important right now as the pandemic has heightened the awareness of the public and policymakers alike about the importance of clean, safe, and reliable water to protect public health. We must, at this juncture, keep our message loud and clear as never before. For our virtual Water Week webinar this year, we have a great lineup of speakers. First, let me briefly, just by way of protocol, discuss a couple of the Zoom controls so that we can make sure our webinar goes as smoothly as possible and that you all get everything you need out of this hour and a half. All participants are muted, but we do encourage your participation during the EPA question and answer session by submitting a question using the question and answer or Q&A icon located near the bottom of your webinar screen in the toolbar. You can also use the Q&A function. If you experience technical difficulties, an association staff member will quickly assist you. Backup dial-in numbers were provided in the confirmation email if your audio quality is or becomes an issue, so you can use those backup numbers by dialing in. And the full recording and a link to the slide deck will be posted on the WaterWeek website, which is www.waterweek.us. Again, www.waterweek.us, and that will be posted later this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us today. With that, I'd now like to turn it over to the Water Research Foundation's Chief of Subscriber Services, Brenly McKenna, to announce our first speakers from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Take it away, Brenly.
All right, thank you, Adam, and hello, everyone. My name is Brenly McKenna. I'm the Chief of Subscriber Services at the Water Research Foundation. I'm actually coming to you by ways of Denver, Colorado. This year, we're fortunate to have two important office directors from the U.S. EPA's Office of Water, Andrew Sawyers and Jennifer McLean. They will be discussing key policy priorities for their offices. And we'll have a few minutes for questions after both of their presentations are complete. If you have questions during their presentations, please use the Q&A function located near the bottom of your webinar screen in the toolbar. We may not be able to get to every question, but please ask and we'll try to get to many as possible. Please join me in welcoming Andrew Sawyers. Andrew is the Director of the EPA's Office of Wastewater Management. Andrew, take it away.
Thanks, Brenna. I hope everyone can hear me. Can you hear me well?
You're good, Andrew.
Sound great.
Sounds good.
Great, thanks. So thanks again to NACWA. Thanks, Adam, Chris, Brenna, and the team. And Adam, as you said, there are quite a few people who are signed on. So I want to thank the entire water sector for the support and the engagement over the last several weeks. And I think to your point, Adam, certainly there's quite a bit happening, but I think in many ways, the last several weeks have demonstrated, at least to us at EPA, the incredible resilience of the sector and the participation in the various engagements and conversations have really helped us to be a lot more responsive, more targeted, and hopefully some of our efforts have helped to ensure that water and wastewater systems are in a better position to provide to the customers across this country. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the Office of Wastewater Management response to COVID-19, and also provide some quick updates on some of the other priorities that we're working on. I think for many of you, a lot of those priorities are still crucial, but I think working on COVID-19 has essentially, that is the top priority. And I think for most of us, we're spending a lot of time, a lot of hours over the last several weeks working on this. The one thing I also wanted to point out to many of you, oftentimes we talk about the working environments within which we operate on a daily basis, but I talk about how proud I am of the engagement with the water sector, but the men and women of EPA over the last several weeks have just been incredible, especially in the Office of Water, and spending the extensive amount of time that they have in making sure that we're responding and providing the resources or support that is needed. It's been frankly amazing working with those folks there within the office, and they have fully embraced their role in supporting the sector. I think as we, in terms of some general things I want to talk through, I mentioned a bit about the time that we have been spending with the sector, rural, urban, small operators. And I think a lot of the discussion that we have had has really helped us to be, as I mentioned before, more responsive. And I think I'm going to leave a lot of the day-to-day activities or some of the activities that we have implemented to Jennifer. Jennifer will mention that the Water Security Division within Jennifer's shop has been instrumental in moving a lot of this forward. The division supports both the drinking water as well as clean water, but a lot of the activities, whether it's PPE, supply chain, many of those items have been targeted. That office has taken the lead, and so Jennifer will mention that, including the letter that the administrator sent to all 50 governors urging them to be more supportive of the drinking water and wastewater employees, ensuring that they're considered essential employees, essential workers by state authorities. So Jennifer will talk a bit about that and some of the work that we're doing in support of other programs, state water programs, and tribal leaders. We also have been working to provide new information and resources to various stakeholders that many of the operators can use during support of their efforts to address the pandemic. An item that I think many of you have been engaged on that I think is important, we're working very closely with the research community. CDC in particular has been a partner of us on many of these activities. We're also working with other external organizations to better understand virus entrainment, some of the disinfection related issues in wastewater. And so as we look at just some of the concerns or some of the questions that have been expressed to us, I know as a matter of fact, I think last week the agency published that we will be working closely on surveillance type research with CDC to better understand some of the concerns that I just expressed. We're also coordinating very closely with the Office of Compliance, that's OECA, to address important regulatory flexibility, and I'll probably spend a little bit of time in this, but moving through pretty quickly. On March 26th, the agency issued a memo that my shop, Jennifer's shop, spent a significant amount of time with OECA, the Office of Enforcement Compliance Assurance Program, to ensure that we were being responsive to many of the questions that the members, many of you, posed to us. The memo announced sort of a temporary policy, retroactively applicable to March 13th, where particularly in the enforcement realm, trying to figure out ways to provide flexibility to entities to address their legal obligations during the pandemic. And so what we said in that memo is that the agency will exercise discretion as appropriate, where compliance obligations are just not practical due to COVID. And it covers several areas: routine compliance monitoring and reporting. It covers settlement agreement, consent decree obligations, reporting obligations, milestones, including force majeure notifications. Covers facility operations, including requirements where facilities should contact the appropriate implementing authority. Placing the highest priority on continued operations of public water systems. I think for many who have seen the memo, you will realize that is the most important part of it, ensuring that systems, continued operations are critical. It also touched a bit on some general conditions where entities should make every effort to comply with their obligations and act as responsibly as appropriate. Specifically, there are some other items that the memo sort of alluded to in the NPDES space. Application issues and how the permittee should contact the permitting authority if there's a need to reissue or modify permits. It also talks a little bit about NOIs, wet signature, and how to address that if you have questions, getting in touch with EPA to make sure those issues are addressed. Public participation, especially where you cannot have face-to-face transaction. It discusses options to do that, whether it's through some virtual forum or something similar. we touch a bit, or we're going to be talking a bit about the NPDES updates and providing updates through a newspaper or through websites. Those flexibilities are being discussed. We also get focused a little bit on items related to the pre-treatment program. This is an area that we've gotten quite a few questions about in the pre-treatment program, and the need to work closely with the control authority, or if it's an EPA issued permit, the EPA regional pre-treatment coordinators. Stormwater discharges are also things that we're trying to provide some FAQs around, trying to make sure that you know, to the extent there are COVID-related delays, that permittees should issues around stabilization, good housekeeping, how those activities could be addressed during the pandemic. And finally, one other item that we want to provide some input on, and I'm not sure exactly how many of you on the line this would be of interest to, but we're also working very closely with the ag community to address some really difficult issues that they're wrestling with, particularly around excess milk and also mortality issues in the sector. There's some concerns there, and we're working closely to help address some of those. I want to touch close, I want to sort of move beyond some of the COVID-related items, and I know Jennifer has quite a bit to share there, and talk a little bit about some of the other activities that we're focused on in terms of the priorities within OWM space, OWM's lane. We are, the SRF program, our offices recently combined to provide some guidance to states on just some of the flexibilities that are available in the SRF space, whether it's you know, interest rate transactions, to the extent some communities are having concerns with repayment, just the flexibilities that are available and can be deployed if needed. WIFIA program is still actively in place, frankly. You know, some of the more recent loans that were closed, I think we closed 2 this week, somewhere north of almost close to about $500 million. I think the tick or the true interest rate was almost 1%. In one transaction was less than 1%. Those interest rates are unheard of. So again, options and possibilities for communities that would like to utilize, whether it's the SRF WIFIA or some of the other financial infrastructure programs that are available. We're also continuing our work on affordability. We are actually pushing ahead on this. A lot of appreciation to the work that this community has engaged in, along with AWWA and others. You provided some suggestions to us that we will likely incorporate in the next iteration of what we're calling the 2020 supplement around affordability, and it will likely speak very clearly to some of the concerns that you expressed in terms of making sure that the poorest within communities are considered. And so I don't have quite a timeline yet, but we're working to get the Federal Register published, and there are several internal deliberations happening, and once those are completed, then I'll have a much better idea on the timeline and when we will likely publish this Federal Register and ask for your input to let us know if at least we're in the ballpark, if we've gotten it, if we have something that potentially could help communities address their wastewater obligations, but in many ways we'll also touch a bit on some of the drinking water elements. I also, in terms of other activities that we're focused on, integrated planning has been sort of a big tool within this sector, and something that many of you have considered. The work is continuing. We recently hired an interim ombudsman. We're working to actually hire a permanent ombudsman. That process is moving along. I think I mentioned this when we last talked. You know, we're working to both Sally Gutierrez from my shop and Mark Pollins from OWECA sent out documents emphasizing the importance of integrated planning and encouraging municipalities. If you would like to engage with us, we would be happy to you know, talk to you about how integrated planning could become part of your efforts going forward within the permit space or within the compliance space. We're planning to get a report out to Congress fairly soon, within the time frame that Congress asks for it. We're also continuing our work around peak flows blending. We embarked on a rulemaking process in 2018. Where again, a significant amount of conversations are happening internally. We did a lot of outreach. We think we have a potential path forward, but again, with COVID, there are a lot of things that are under consideration. So we will provide you as it becomes available, as we're aware and better understanding of the circumstances. We'll provide additional information in terms of timing and when we could potentially expect to move this forward.
All right, Andrew, thank you so much. We do have to move forward on to Jennifer. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, that's fine. I was just gonna touch on, I was just gonna wrap up there, so that's fine. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much for providing those updates. Now I'm going to introduce Jennifer McLean. Jennifer is the director of the EPA's Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water, and we are so thankful that she could be with us today and to provide some insights on the key priorities within her office. Jennifer?
Hi, thank you, Brenly, for the introduction, and thank you, Adam, and all for the invitation. I really appreciate you including me in your meeting today. I just want to start by thanking all of the participants in this meeting for your significant and collective efforts to keep our nation's water clean during this very difficult time. The COVID-19 pandemic has really given our shared mission even more importance than it ever has. And as Andrew said, the collaboration across the water sector has really been incredible, and we appreciate all the work that you all have done hand in hand with us to support drinking water and wastewater services that are really essential to reducing the spread of COVID-19. I am quite proud of the response that EPA staff has stood up, and Andrew talked a little bit about the work that we've done, and it has all been in partnership with you all, with the states, with the water utilities, both big and small, all of the associations, and all of our important partners. So just appreciating that so much. I'm going to talk a little bit about the specific resources that we've been focused on, and we have been working as we've been getting input from the water sector. As Andrew said, the discussions that we're having with all of you is really informing the work that we're doing. And very early on, we heard a lot about the primary threats to the water sector that were perceived. And those are one being potential for absenteeism, if workers get sick or cannot function in their jobs because they're being quarantined, concern about supply chain disruptions, and then of course the financial impacts, which we are all working on. And so one of the first things we put together was a pandemic incident action checklist, and this gives a concise list of practical actions that water and wastewater utilities can undertake to respond to COVID-19. I hope you've had a chance to see that up on our website, and I hope that it's of use to you. We're also very focused early on, as Andrew mentioned, in our work in designating water and wastewater workers as essential. And we started that by working with the Department of Homeland Security on the guidelines that they issued to make sure that there were sufficient details about the water workforce and the sectors that the water industry is dependent on. If you haven't looked at it lately, we have been updating it as we have been working with DHS to update it as we've gotten input from various members of the water sector asking for to make sure that it's really clear about what is needed. as Andrew mentioned, the Administrator Wheeler sent a note to governors and to tribal leaders to ensure that water and wastewater workers are considered essential under their authorities. And we put together a template letter for any entity, a water utility worker, technical assistance provider, anyone who may be having difficulty gaining access to the areas they need to do their job, to provide that information that they might need to gain access as an essential worker. All of these are available on EPA's coronavirus or COVID-19 website. And we have been continuously updating this with the resources that we're developing, and then also with frequently asked questions that are coming in. So for the resources, we are doing things such as press releases or emails out to our partners to make sure that folks know that those new resources are there. But for the questions and answers, those are just being updated on a more continuous basis. So you might want to check back every once in a while as we hear questions. You know, if we get the same question over and over again from multiple entities, then we'll put together a response and get it up on our website for your convenience and as a resource. We've also been working with many stakeholders in the water sector and FEMA to coordinate the shipment of reusable cloth masks to water and wastewater utilities. This is an effort that came together really quickly in the span of maybe 48 hours. We were looking to coordinate the very first shipment after hearing from FEMA that these masks could be available to critical infrastructure, including the water sector. So appreciate all of those who worked on it with us to get those logistics in order just in the span of a few hours. We have so far allocated about 1 million PPE cloth masks to utilities in the hardest hit states. And we just so much thank the folks who worked with us to put this together and the utilities that have volunteered to be distribution centers for their area or for their state. These are really critical for those workers who need a barrier to stop the spread of COVID-19. We're also looking at chemical supply issues, most notably carbon dioxide. We've been working on that with respect to its availability for a number of drinking water plants that rely on that supply. That's been threatened by the reduction in driving gasoline and ethanol plants, as carbon dioxide is a byproduct of ethanol production. And so a number of those plants started to diminish their production or to shut down, and there was quite a concern about that there might be CO2 shortages. So we've been working with the Department of Homeland Security on this, and we are hoping to put some resources available to those systems that are dependent on CO2 up on our website very soon. Just want to thank you for the notification and bringing this to our attention. It allowed us to work with our federal partners and to put these resources together. We would like to encourage utilities and others who find out that there are chemical supply concerns, either in a particular area or across the board, to raise them to our attention as soon as possible so that we can look to ameliorate the difficulty. And lastly, I'll just say that we very much appreciate the utility efforts to keep water on for all Americans. Those utilities that are putting in place the discontinuation of service cutoffs or restoring services to customers, these practices, of course, provide critical support for public health, and we definitely support those. I'll just spend a couple minutes. I think I have a couple more minutes to talk just a few things about what the drinking water program is doing in terms of other priorities. We are focused as a very high priority in getting a final lead and copper rule revision out this by the end of this summer. We are also working on our preliminary regulatory determination, where we proposed at the end of last year to regulate PFOA and PFOS. We just recently extended the comment period an additional 30 days to June 10th. So please do send us your comments on those. We're looking forward to receiving them. We have a number of new grant programs under America's Water Infrastructure Act that we have stood up and are still actively working within those grant programs, as well as Andrew mentioned, our SRF programs and our WIFIA programs. We think that these funding and financing programs are very critical to the water sector, and particularly now. So those are very high priority for us to be working on. And lastly, also under America's Water Infrastructure Act, the community water systems have responsibilities for developing risk assessments and emergency response plans. Of course, those are very critical in the response that we are doing right now for the pandemic. So I wanted to say thank you to the largest utilities that had their first deadline on March 31st of this year. And thank you all for meeting that deadline in the midst of your response to this pandemic. And lastly, I'd just like to acknowledge again the water workforce as a whole, really going above and beyond to protect our nation's waters. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Jennifer, for providing those perspectives. We do have a few minutes left for Q&A, so if you haven't already, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your webinar screen to ask a question. We do have a few ready to go. So Andrew, looks like this one is for you. Andrew, does your office have a national needs assessment that could be used for national infrastructure legislation?
Hi, sorry about that. I just realized I was on mute. Brenna, I'm sorry, a national needs assessment, is this with respect to the needs survey or?
Yeah, let's assume that it is.
Okay. If it's the needs survey, we are working on trying to get the next needs survey out. But maybe an issue that I think there've been a lot of discussion on this point over the last several weeks has to do with utility revenue losses and how to potentially develop some instrument or instruments that can help to standardize what the losses look like, and to the extent there are opportunities for covering some of this in the future, that at least the states would have some standard way of working with utilities to provide reimbursement. So that is perhaps one. I'm not sure if exactly that's the question that the participant was posing, but back to the needs survey, we are working on getting, we're moving that ahead. We're perhaps a little further than I thought we would be, but we're not, there's still quite a bit of work to be done there.
Okay, thank you. The next question is a little bit on the longer side. The question is wondering if there's been any discussion at the EPA about providing direct access or serving as a placement agent to the Federal Reserve's Municipal Liquidity Facility, so that municipal utilities can have a way to sell notes to the Fed without having to use a conduit such as the state, county, or city.
No, we have actually, we are having conversations with the WIFIA program about some specific liquidity concerns or liquidity relief, not in the context of how that effort was posed. It's probably going to be a much longer answer. And so whoever posed that question, I'd be happy to actually talk to them separately. So if you're on the line and would like to reach out, I'd be happy to actually have a conversation about this. But it's an important issue that a lot of entities are thinking through, and we have a few ideas on potentially how to move ahead with that.
Great, thank you. And we do have a few more actually related to COVID-19 and the coronavirus. So wastewater treatment facility staffing is usually pretty lean. Has there been any incidents of staff illness due to the coronavirus where operational integrity has been put at risk? And is the EPA preparing for this with a list of substitute staff or consultants that might aid municipalities in an emergency?
So I could speak to this quickly, and I think Jennifer can too. I don't think, at least, and I've had hundreds of conversations over the last couple of weeks, and I don't think there are any systems that frankly have been compromised. I think in certainly a few cases there might be illness, but I don't think those, at least what have been communicated to me, I don't think any of those systems have been compromised. I think, as Jennifer noted, we're actively, and through the participation of whether it's WEF, AWWA, NACWA, and several of the organizations, having a very clear idea where the issues are. A lot of our responses have been, targeted, purposeful, if you will, in getting the PPE and or some of the other services and support to the utilities. But to the question, Brenna, a lot is happening. I haven't heard of any system actually being compromised. That's not to say that that's the case, but I have not heard.
Yeah, Andrew, this is Jennifer, and I'll just add to your response in that I think we do know of systems that have had workers who have been impacted, but not such that, as Andrew said, such that it would impact the entire running and functioning of the system. But there are resources available on the website that I was mentioning at EPA to provide information on, for example, the Water and Wastewater Agency response networks, which are an important resource for utilities in terms of finding backups. In addition, we have information on our small system technical assistance providers. We have information up there on the National Rural Water Association Circuit Rider program, which is funded by USDA's Rural Development Program. All of these are potential options for systems that are looking to have contingency plans for certified operators. We also have a list of state operator certification contacts so that within a state, someone can look for other certified operators in the state. And sort of on a similar vein, we have resources on laboratories also if there's a concern about a potential of having a backup laboratory.
All right, thank you both. That's all the time we have for questions. And let me just take this opportunity to thank both Andrew and Jennifer again for their time today and all of the great work they're doing for the EPA on behalf of the water sector. Now I'm going to turn it over to WEF's Board Vice President and Treasurer, Jamie Eichelberger.
Great, thank you, Brenly. I'm Jamie Eichelberger, the WEF Board Vice President, and today we're fortunate to hear from 4 key members of Congress who are true friends of the water sector. Senator John Boozman, Congressman and Chairman of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Peter DeFazio, Congressman John Catco, and Congressman Jared Huffman. Like all of us, I know they would have preferred to be here in person to discuss the important legislative work they're doing on behalf of the water sector, but they were gracious enough to provide remarks through pre-recorded videos and share these with us. It's great to see such bipartisan support for water from both the House and Senate. So let's see what these key members of Congress have to say.
These are challenging times. We've all been asked to make sacrifices. So while I would prefer to be addressing you in person, video chats and conference calls have become our way of life for the time being, as we practice safe habits like social distancing. I want to thank NACWA for asking me to offer remarks on what should have been the start of WaterWeek in Washington, D.C. In past years, I've talked about the importance of infrastructure investment and why water resources development deserves our support. Of course, those things are still important, but in this unique and unprecedented time, I would like to also give a heartfelt thank you to each and every person participating in this webinar. Traditionally, water and wastewater professionals are working around the clock to keep safe, affordable, and reliable water services going, typically with little to no fanfare. I'm so appreciative of the hard work our essential water and wastewater workers are accomplishing. The water industry as a whole is doing its part to keep the water flowing to all customers. The gratitude we feel is even greater during this very difficult time as we work hard to prevent the spread of COVID-19. While passing WRDA and supporting different pieces of water-related legislation is so very important, I thought it was even more important to thank all of the folks involved in ensuring everyone in this country has safe, clean, affordable, and reliable water and wastewater services. You are truly essential and deserve our appreciation, so give yourselves a pat on the back. I look forward to continuing to strengthen our water infrastructure and being with you in person in the future to discuss improvements to water resources. Access to clean water is a necessity, today more than ever. Thank you for supporting these systems and providing clean, reliable, and affordable water for our country. Again, thank you so very much.
Welcome to virtual WaterWeek 2020. As are many things today, this is a bit unique way to celebrate the critical needs for clean water in the United States and around the world. It hasn't become any more apparent to anybody than right now in terms of the idea that you have to be washing your hands frequently and that many people are restricted to their homes and obviously need access to clean drinking water there. We're very concerned, and in the first bill we attempted, myself and Frank Pallone, we have some shared jurisdiction over these issues. I have wastewater, he has drinking water, he chairs energy and commerce, that we get some program like what's called the Low Income Heating Assistance Program to cover water utilities. But unfortunately, the Republicans refused to include that in the package, but we haven't given up. We're working on something called CARES 2, and we hope to get something in there. We did get in the small business relief package the authority that their loan funds would be used to, and to be required to be used to pay their employees, pay their utility bills, and pay their rent or mortgage. So that way we're keeping a whole bunch of folks intact, including utilities. It came to me very early on, one of my first calls with one of calls through all my 7 counties, and have had all public officials and health officials on. And in one county that has an incredibly advanced wastewater system, something that actually was funded under the Obama Recovery Act, their revenues have fallen by 60% because the major part of their revenues came from 2 major industrial plants, both of which are shuttered because they couldn't observe social distancing. The conditions were unsafe. So I know many utilities right now are distressed. They're seeing a major reduction in revenues, and we're hopeful we can do something directly to utilities also in future legislation. We're going through a regular order on certain things. I intend to keep up the great tradition that my colleague Bill Schuster started, I think 7 years ago, to do a water resources development bill in regular order every 2 years. We have put out a request to all the members, the representatives, that they submit their requests for projects to the committee by the 1st of May, and projects are coming in. Projects are coming in way beyond, obviously, the resources and needs of the Corps. The Corps needs additional funds. They've got a $40 billion critical infrastructure backlog, and it's something I'm working on. I did have some success in the first CARES bill, getting them additional money for harbor maintenance, and I'll continue to plug away there. And then the waters of the U.S. As you all know, the Trump administration has put the waters of the U.S. under attack. When questioning the administrator in a hearing, I think it was last fall, how many tributary streams would be exempt, how many river miles, what would be exempt? He said, well, we don't have those figures. We don't have those figures. We don't have those figures. Well, we think about 80% would be exempt. This would take us back to the good old days, the 1960s, when everybody dumped their crap out the back door of the industry, rivers burned and were severely polluted. For them to promulgate a rule when they have the slightest idea of an impact, they say, well, we don't have a way to calculate it. Well, actually, yeah, you do. You've got all that documentation. It was developed before the Trump administration. So we're fighting back on waters of the U.S. And Frank Pallone again and I have partnered just now. He's again chair of Energy and Commerce to push back on EPA, which wants to use any excuse to allow polluters to pollute, and is saying on an emergency basis they want to spend a whole host of environmental laws relating to clean water, clean air. So not the happiest news for virtual week, celebrating the essential nature of water. But I'm with you guys and women, and let's go forward, continue to provide vital services, continue to fight what we need for a clean water future. Have a good virtual conference.
Hello, I'm Congressman John Catco. I'd like to welcome everyone participating in this year's Water Week, and would like to thank NACWA and its members for their continued commitment to protecting and enhancing our nation's drinking water and wastewater systems. Since coming to Congress, advocating for policies that strengthen and improve our nation's water infrastructure has been one of my top priorities. Now more than ever, it is critical that we protect and maintain our water systems. Although I wish I could be speaking with all of you in person, I'm so very grateful to NACWA for hosting this webinar so I can provide you all with an update on my recent efforts to ensure every American continues to have access to clean drinking water during the coronavirus pandemic. Increased financial hardship during the COVID-19 pandemic has left many families across this great country unable to pay their water bills. With reduced revenues, water providers may soon be forced to increase rates or reduce vital maintenance to water delivery and treatment infrastructure. For this reason, I recently led a bipartisan effort to urge House and Senate leaders to provide direct relief to water ratepayers and utilities in future coronavirus legislation. With this aid, we will ensure those struggling to pay their water bills will have support and ensure water utilities have the necessary resources to carry out important maintenance and repair projects. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented new challenges to maintaining and operating our water systems. Nevertheless, I remain committed to advocating for the support and resources you need to continue serving our communities. And I'm very proud to partner alongside you during these turbulent times. I want to thank each and every one of you for your continued commitment to this important work, and hope you enjoy the rest of your webinar. Please be safe with your families, and may God bless you all.
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me to participate in this virtual Water Week. I am just as disappointed as you are, I'm sure, that we can't meet together in person to talk about the future of innovative water management. But I'm glad that we at least have this opportunity to share some ideas together remotely. So thanks for that. Thank you also to all of you who are working so hard to ensure that your customers, our constituents, maintain their access to reliable, clean water and wastewater services during this pandemic. It's not easy to keep meeting this important mandate while keeping your workforce safe and while you're dealing with budget crunches as well. As many of you know, I've worked in the California water world for most of my career, dating back to my time as a Marin Municipal Water District board member and as a state assembly member in Sacramento, chairing the Water Parks and Wildlife Committee. I now chair the Water, Oceans, and Wildlife Subcommittee, the WOW Subcommittee, as I call it. And I spent much of the last year conducting informational hearings on the latest and greatest in the water world, including hearings on reservoir operations, climate impacts, innovation in the water sector, addressing the unique water needs of rural communities, and expanding desalination and reuse. And my belief is that we can make good policy by good process and by leaving at least some of the politics at the door. This is the approach that I took when I chaired the Water Committee in the California State Assembly during the drought years in the late 2000s, and I was able to help author some of the historic bipartisan set of water reforms that we enacted into law with the help of many of you in 2009. I take pride in being able to draw on my home state of California when looking for sustainable water practices that we should support at the federal level. So a lot of Congress's regular work has been put on hold as we respond to this pandemic, which is why I'm especially glad that we spent the time earlier this year to circulate and refine these proposals. In the coming weeks, once Congress has made the investments needed to address our current public health crisis and stabilize the economy, Chairman DeFazio and I and many others are going to get to work on infrastructure investments that can revitalize the economy. Thanks to all the feedback we got earlier this year, we're ready for that infrastructure investment conversation. We can focus on those shovel-ready investments that put money to work quickly on sustainable and durable water solutions. We've heard from many of you that we need to eliminate the tax disincentives for water conservation and runoff reduction rebates. Those tax bills are a huge disincentive to homeowners and an administrative burden for all of you, and so we're going to fix that in this bill. We've heard from water and sanitation districts all over the country that you need a dedicated funding stream for water recycling and reuse projects instead of the intermittent and cumbersome funding approach that we have now. My bill incorporates Congresswoman Grace Napolitano's provisions to expand and reform the Bureau of Reclamation's water recycling program and create approximately 650,000 acre-feet of new yield. We've heard from many utilities about how important it is to develop a diverse, robust water workforce as the current workforce ages out. So we'll make sure we get that done too. I want to thank you all for recognizing the need to pool our collective wisdom and work together to secure a better water future, even as we deal with a very uncertain present. Thank you for all you do, and I look forward to the work that we can achieve together on sustainable and ambitious water investments. Thanks for your time, and please stay safe.
Once again, we greatly appreciate the remarks provided by the Senator and 3 congressmen and all they're doing for our sector. But it's important that we collectively continue to advocate for the necessary policies and funding to ensure the water sector has the tools and resources to continue to provide communities with the safe, reliable, and affordable water services they deserve. I encourage all members and attendees today to visit the WaterWeek's website resource page at www.waterweek.us, where you can find this year's Joint Water Sector Congressional Advocacy document and other documents and tools to assist you in lobbying your senators and representatives during and after Water Week. Even though we're in a unique time right now, please don't hesitate to pick up the phone, email, write letters, and continue to stay in touch with our elected representatives. With that, I would now like to turn it over to the Executive Director of the Water Reuse Association, Pat Sinacropi.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi, everyone. My name is Pat Sinacropi, the Executive Director of the Water Reuse Association. While each and every one of us works daily to demonstrate the importance of water, as discussed earlier, Water Week is the time to come together as a sector and communicate to Capitol Hill and federal agencies the importance that water plays in our everyday lives and the important work our sector does to ensure it is safely and cleanly provided to hundreds of millions of people each day. So as the last feature of today's webinar, we'll hear from some of our water sector partners on key priorities and the advocacy that we as a sector are doing and need to do to ensure our voice is heard in Washington. So we have a great lineup of association partners here with us today. We'll begin with Radhika Fox, CEO of the U.S. Water Alliance. And Radhika from there will hand it off to our next speaker. So Radhika, why don't you take it away?
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really honored to be speaking today on behalf of the Value of Water campaign. The Value of Water campaign is a collaboration of over 30 top organizations across the water sector, including many of the host partners here, AMWA, AWWA, NACWA, WEF. We also have local water utilities all around the country and private sector leaders across the water value chain. For the last 5 years, we have been working together to build public and political will for investment in our nation's water systems. In March, if I could please get the next slide. In March, the Value of Water campaign conducted our 5th annual poll that really asks American voters to assess their support for water infrastructure and water investment. It's one of the largest national polls on water that has occurred over the last 5 years. This year, it's quite interesting because the poll was conducted in the middle of March, really when the COVID-19 pandemic was hitting communities across the country. And as such, it really provides insights for us about what were American voters thinking about as far as priorities and values as it relates to water infrastructure and other issues. And what you see on the slide there is that, you know, even in the face of this pandemic, this global pandemic, American voters still think that infrastructure investment is a critically important priority. 80% said that. And when it comes to rebuilding our water infrastructure, 84% support greater investment. We actually, you don't see it on the slide, but if you want to view the full poll results, we actually also asked a question, would you be willing to get behind a $1.2 trillion plan to get it done, to get our water systems to be resilient and strong, and 73% backed that. What is particularly important to note about these poll results is that the support for investment in water cuts across every demographic, geographic, and partisan line. Whether you're white or black, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, whether you live in a smaller rural town or a big American city, there is American voter support for investment in water. So as you all are undertaking your education efforts with elected officials at every level of government, your advocacy and lobbying pushes on the Hill to get water and future COVID recovery packages, we really urge you to utilize these numbers to make it clear to our elected officials that investing in water is a safe bet, important bet to make for this country. The full poll results, the Value of Water campaign has made them available, so you can find those at thevalueofwater.org. And I also encourage you to visit the WaterWeek website where all the resources for WaterWeek, including a fact sheet that you can utilize on the poll, are available there. And just in closing, I wanted to also share a second resource with the group for WaterWeek and for advocacy beyond this week. So a number of organizations on the line, a number of listeners calling in, worked together to develop what we are calling COVID-19 Relief and Recovery, Guiding Principles to Secure a Water Future. You see the 4 principles listed here on the slide. I encourage you to go to the website for the U.S. Water Alliance, www.uswateralliance.org, and sign on to these principles. As I said, we have 250 organizations signed on, and we think that educating people around these 4 principles, letting our elected officials know they're on the hook to make investments aligned with these principles, that's something that we all need to be working on together, and we really invite you to join us in that effort. With that, I will turn it back over to you, Pat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Radhika. Next, we'll hear from Jim Williams, President of the American Waterworks Association. Thanks for joining us, Jim.
Well, thank you, Pat. First off, I'd like to say thank you to everybody on the call here for your heroic efforts in support of the essential service that we all provide together. Next, I'd like to thank all the speakers today for their perspectives and insight. This is clearly a critical time for the water sector, requiring a good understanding of the facts and then bold and decisive action going forward. At AWWA, our government affairs staff has seen three primary areas of interest in Congress. And as we heard the comments of Congressman DeFazio and Catco, and I suspect had we heard Congressman Huffman, he would have echoed the same. But what we're hearing there is that assistance to low-income customers is going to be really important. Assistance to water utilities seeing major revenue declines, and also infrastructure investment to both enhance our systems and to create jobs. Recently, to help quantify these issues, AWWA partnered with AMWA, and we commissioned a report on the economic impacts on drinking water utilities. And the findings were really quite significant. What we found was that there was essentially a direct aggregate financial impact of $13.9 billion. And this included the reduction in revenue and increased delinquencies. But in addition to that, there were other financial impacts, including delaying of up to $5 billion in capital projects. And when you put all that together, what happens is, in terms of impact on gross domestic product, is about a $37.7 billion impact. So clearly, the financial impact is quite significant. And everybody on this call, I know, is aware and at the ready to do what we can to relay that message. Some of the things we've been doing at AWWA include issuing a legislative alert to our members, asking them to ask Congress to, in fact, address water sector needs. Our staff is in continuing dialogue with congressional staff and other key water associations, many who are on this call, to ensure that these important issues are in fact well understood. I'd like to invite people to take a look at the alert on the AWWA website, awwa.org, to assist in contacting your members of Congress, and for additional information available there as well, especially as it relates to the impact of the coronavirus. Finally, I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this important and timely webinar. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. Next up is Deirdre Finn, Executive Director of the Council of Infrastructure Financing Authorities. They oversee the SRF programs essential to investment in our water infrastructure. Deirdre.
Thank you so much, Pat. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
You can flip to the next slide. As Pat said, CFA represents the state revolving funds. I wanted to mention to everybody that if you have an SRF loan and you're worried about making the next payment, please reach out to your SRF program manager. Many states have restrictions on doing broad across the board policies for relief, but every single SRF is prepared to help everybody who has an SRF loan get through this crisis. So the Council of Infrastructure Financing Authority released its 2020 Safe Water Infrastructure Action Plan to help America get back to work. SAFE stands for Saving, Accelerating, Filling, and Expediting the SRF Project Pipeline. The project pipeline is available on our website at www.cfanet.org/coronavirus. It's the coronavirus response page under advocacy. The SRF project pipeline today includes more than $70 billion in current and prospective projects. So you can see what's the project list by state on our website. The SRFs are uniquely positioned to help deliver stimulus funding to thousands of communities across the nation, which we all know investing in water infrastructure creates high wage jobs across the entire economy, from planning to construction. And our plan supports all types of projects at all phases of development. So it's really about, again, saving projects in the pipeline, accelerating projects through the pipeline, refilling the pipeline, and expediting construction of projects. We have 6 recommendations, and you can find them on our website. Those recommendations really focus on reducing federal requirements on loans and providing more funding and more flexibility to the SRFs to fund more projects. You can also find on our website at the www.cfanet.org/InfoHub resources that might be valuable or helpful to you in your advocacy. We have a profile, an SRF profile for your state, as well as fact sheets on and backgrounders and primers and information that could help. And I want to thank everybody. I want to thank NACWA for organizing this and all of the partners for participating. And I especially want to thank everybody who's attended this for your service and for your advocacy. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Deirdre. Next up, we will hear from the American Public Works Association's President, Bill Spearman. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Pat. And thank you all for the opportunity to participate in this important webinar. I'm very proud to represent over 30,000 dedicated women and men in the public works industry who are providing essential services every day to improve the quality of life for our citizens. The pandemic has highlighted the importance of these professionals as a necessary component of our nation's first responder network, as they work tirelessly to ensure that our infrastructure is performing at the level of service and providing the services to ensure the needs of our citizens are being met. Many of these members work in the water industry, and their efforts are focused on protecting the health of our citizens as well as protecting the environment. That is why programs like the Clean Water SRF, Drinking Water SRF, WIFIA are so important to our members. The reauthorization of the Clean Water SRF and the WIFIA programs in the WRDA bills is a positive step, although we believe that higher funding levels for them would be more appropriate since the projected clean water needs nationwide are approximately $500 billion over the next 20 years. Infrastructure funding is especially important to our response to the economic impacts of the pandemic. Representative DeFazio released a statement today that said the best way to restart our economy and put workers first is with a massive investment in the kind of infrastructure that will help future generations succeed. And he included a modernized waste and drinking water system in his list of critical infrastructure. Thank you, sir. Additionally, water systems need to be reminded that the SRFs can be used for operations as well as pipes, pumps, and plants. A lot of our systems are going to need this source of funding in the near future, as water systems are predicting around a $12.5 billion shortfall in revenue due to lack of pavements as well as precautions that they are taking due to the pandemic. We are pleased that the WRDA bill does include language extending and increasing funding for our wastewater workforce training programs. The need for qualified and licensed operators has been highlighted by the effects that the pandemic has had on the staff of many small systems around our country. Lastly, last year, the United States House and Transportation Infrastructure Committee unanimously passed a bill that reauthorized the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Program and included language that extended the NPDES program life cycle from 5 years to 10 years. A 10-year term for NPDES permits would be more efficient than the current 5-year term due to the inordinate amount of time, effort, and expense involved in reviewing permits and renewing them every 5 years for both the permittees as well as the permit agencies. This expense and time would be better served if the permitting process, instead of developing permits, but actually spent on permit implementation. Would you go to our next slide, please? And these are our priorities that we've had with this 116th Congress, and we would be more than willing and happy to talk to you guys about them at all as you go forward. But again, thank you, NACWA and the other partners for putting on this great webinar, and thank you for all the attendees who've been with us.
Thanks, Bill. Next, we'll hear from Nathan Ohl, CEO for the Rural Community Assistance Partnerships.
Thank you very much, and feel free to go on the next slide for us. First of all, I want to stop and say that I hope everyone on this call is safe and well. We obviously know there are incredible issues that are happening across the country, and so just want to make sure that we put it out there that everyone's going through a lot today, and we appreciate you taking as much time as you are today to be with us as a part of WaterWeek 2020. RCAP is proud to be a partner of WaterWeek going on 3 years now and appreciates the opportunity to participate in adding our voice to the larger water community. If you can head to the next slide, RCAP is the Rural Community Assistance Partnership. We are actually a network of nonprofit partners. We've got 6 regional partners across the country, which you can see in this map. And through those 6 regional partners, have a network of more than 200 service providers that are located in every state, including Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Our goal is really to serve small, rural, and tribal water and wastewater systems, primarily systems of 10,000 or below, but really some of the smallest, most distressed communities across the country. Last year alone, we reached a little over 3.2 million rural residents, including a third of those which came from communities of color, and a third of those which came from communities where their median household income fell below the federal poverty line. Our work is really focused on building capacity at the local level through the technical, managerial, and financial aspects of a water and wastewater system, and ensuring that those systems build their own capacity to continue on their operations and the sustainability of their systems themselves. If you go to the next slide, we've got 3 main priorities when it comes to congressional appropriations over the coming year. The first of which is continuing to support the USDA Rural Development Water and Wastewater Loan and Grant Programs. We hope to continue to provide $1.6 billion in loans and $600 million in grants for fiscal year 21. And this program is specifically focused on serving rural and tribal areas with populations of 10,000 or less. We also are strong supporters of strong funding levels through the appropriations for both the drinking water and clean water SRF programs. And finally, providing $18 million for the US EPA's National Priorities Water Technical Assistance Program in fiscal year 21. These technical assistance programs at both USDA and EPA are incredibly critical for small, rural, and tribal systems to ensure that they can build their capacity, continue to maintain compliance, and ensure that they continue to provide the safe drinking water and sanitary wastewater that are crucial to the prosperity of those communities across the country. Thank you again to NACWA for coordinating and organizing this webinar and WaterWeek itself, and for all of the WaterWeek partners for their continued support and for the ability to bring the voice of small communities to this important conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. And next up is Dan Hartnett, Chief Advocacy Officer for Legislative and Regulatory Affairs for the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies. Dan.
Great, thanks, Pat. I am Dan Hartnett, Chief Advocacy Officer at AMWA, which is an organization of the nation's largest publicly owned drinking water systems. And we're really happy to be part of this event today. I'll briefly run through some of AMWA's legislative priorities, which will reflect a lot of what you've heard from the other speakers in our partner organizations. In terms of COVID-19, AMWA supports direct assistance to help water and wastewater systems make up for lost revenues. A few minutes ago, Jim mentioned the AMWA AWWA report that estimated the drinking water sector alone could lose almost $14 billion in revenues over the next year because of the pandemic. That was a really valuable finding for us in our advocacy on Capitol Hill, and we're using this data to make the case to Congress that water system revenue assistance must be part of a future COVID-19 response package. Related to that, while many of our members have voluntarily implemented moratoriums on water service disconnections during the pandemic, we are closely watching Capitol Hill because a growing number of lawmakers are calling for a federal ban on water service disconnections. AMWA has outlined several principles that should guide any such ban, and we've shared these with members of Congress. These include limiting any federal moratorium to the COVID-19 public health emergency, ensuring that any moratorium only applies to non-payment related shutoffs and still allows temporary service interruptions for maintenance and repair work, making a distinction between a shutoff moratorium and a mandate to reconnect all customers immediately, as reconnections are a much more time and labor intensive effort, and delivering federal funding assistance to make sure low-income customers do not fall further behind on their water bills as a result of water use during the pandemic. So we're working with our water sector colleagues to make sure that future COVID response legislation reflects these principles. Outside of COVID-19, and was closely engaging with congressional staff who are working to develop a Water Resources Development Act reauthorization bill, also known as WRDA. Just last week, the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee released a draft WRDA reauthorization bill, and AMWA was one of 5 stakeholder organizations that was invited by the committee to submit a formal statement on the draft bill. AMWA's statement explained that we are particularly interested in programs that would be authorized to help drinking water and wastewater systems make their infrastructure more resilient to climate change and extreme weather. The proposed legislation from the EPW committee includes several water resilience programs, but as proposed in the bill, every public water system and wastewater system in the country would be eligible for some sort of new resilience grant assistance from EPA, except for large drinking water systems serving more than 100,000 people. This would exclude roughly 450 drinking water systems nationwide from accessing dedicated resilience assistance. So AMWA was working to fix that as the bills move forward. Clearly, as AMWA represents the nation's largest publicly owned drinking water systems, ensuring their fair treatment and access to funding assistance is a high priority for us. Finally, AMWA is watching discussions on Capitol Hill about possible reforms to the regulatory process under Section 1412 of the Safe Drinking Water Act. We have heard that some members of Congress want to reform the process to move more quickly or to result in regulations for substances that may not be frequently found in water supplies. AMWA supports a regulatory process that is transparent, science-based, and focused on contaminants that actually appear in drinking water at levels of public health concern. So we hope to work with lawmakers on these points. Finally, we do understand that there's strong interest on Capitol Hill to direct EPA to set drinking water standards for certain PFAS like PFOA and PFOS. But again, AMWA believes that the regulatory process for all drinking water contaminants should be consistent and that Congress should not establish special regulatory processes for certain contaminants. And that's about it for AMWA in our major priorities right now. So I'll turn things back over to Pat.
Thanks, Dan. Well, that concludes the speaking lineup for today's webinar. I just want to thank all of the speakers for their comments during the webinar. Thank our partners for the great work that they are doing on our members' behalf to make sure that our members are kept up to date and stay informed about the important policy work that is being done in Washington, D.C. I'd also encourage all of you who are participating in this webinar to take the opportunity of WaterWeek to reach out to your congressional delegation, remind them about the importance of continuing to invest in our water infrastructure, especially during the pandemic crisis. And urge them to include investment in water infrastructure in whatever stimulus package they work on later this year. So that will conclude today's webinar. A recording of the webinar will be posted on the waterweek.us website later this afternoon. We won't be taking questions now, but I do see some questions posted, and I would encourage you that do have questions to send them into any staff person of the partners participating in WaterWeek, and we will be sure to get answers to the questions. We want to thank you again for taking time to participate in today's webinar. Thank you all again for what you're doing to help your communities during this difficult time. We hope everyone stays safe, and we really look forward to seeing you next year in Washington, D.C. for WaterWeek 2021. Enjoy. Have a great evening, guys.